For my thoughts on all the latest happenings in the NFL in a completely relaxed, unscripted format, be sure to check out my channel, JG9 News. And now, on with our feature presentation. This man right here is running back Keith Byars, and he was an incredibly solid player in the NFL for an incredibly long period of time. After being drafted by the Philadelphia Eagles in the first round of the 1986 NFL Draft, Byars went on to be one of the best fullbacks in the game for over a decade, as he was a threat not just out of the backfield as a runner, but especially as a receiver. By the time his career was over, he had found the end zone 54 times and had amassed just under 9,000 yards from scrimmage. During the 1990 season, he was an instrumental part in guiding the Eagles back to the playoffs after finishing the year with a whopping 81 catches, which was the third most in the NFL. And in 1993, as a member of the Miami Dolphins, he made it to the Pro Bowl. In fact, Byars was so good that from 1986 to 98, in that 13-year stretch, he was 10th in the NFL in career receptions. Seriously, of the 9 players who had more catches than Byars from 1986 to 98, 5 of them are currently in the Pro Football Hall of Fame, with those guys being Jerry Rice, Andre Reed, Chris Carter, Michael Irvin, and Tim Brown. And the 4 that aren't are no slouches either, with those men being Irving Fryer, Henry Ellard, Andre Rison, and Gary Clark. He actually held the all-time record at the time for most receptions by a running back. Few players were as reliable catching the football as Byars was throughout the late 1980s and the 1990s, and he is remembered incredibly fondly today for his contributions to the sport on the field. And if you like hearing stories about players from the past and their contributions to the NFL, then be sure to hit that like button down below, subscribe, and turn on that notification bell so you don't miss a single video that we post on the channel. We post daily videos on the weird and wacky history of the NFL, so if you like that kind of stuff and that's right up your alley, then this is the place for you. Thanks in advance for your support. However, after the 1998 season where he played with the New York Jets, this man right here, Keith Byars, would no longer be in the NFL. His career was over, and he would never play professional football again. And the reason why that was the case? Because he was backstabbed by his best friend. Sort of. Football is a cruel business, and football, as you probably know if you watched this channel before, is a very weird business where you never quite know what's about to happen. And sometimes, it's the people you least expect who backstab you and end your career. Because entering the 1999 season, a conflict of sorts arose between Byars and one of his best friends, Bernie Parmalee, that would end up costing one man his entire career. And this is the story behind the 2 men and the bizarre roster cutdown controversy that occurred during the 1999 NFL season. Before I talk about the actual cut in question to Keith Byars, we need some context to understand the other man in the story, as in, this man right here. This man is Bernie Parmalee, and he might have been the best Dolphin running back in the Don Shula years of the post-Larry Zonka era, which is saying a lot about how bad the Dolphins were running the football. Still, Parmalee had one of those remarkable stories where he was a truck driver at UPS after going undrafted. He got a chance to play in the NFL, and against all odds, he took advantage of it, and then some. He was a feel-good story. After playing mainly on special teams, he got his first real chance to carry the football in 1994, and he took advantage of it, finishing the season with 868 rushing yards on 4 yards per carry, and picking up over 1,100 yards from scrimmage while finding the end zone 7 times. Parmalee led the team in rushing yards, rushing touchdowns, and total touchdowns, and he was a big reason why the Dolphins were able to make it to the playoffs and win the AFC East for just the 2nd time in the last 9 seasons. And then, in 1995, he followed that up with an even better campaign, where he once again helped Miami get to the playoffs after amassing over 1,200 yards from scrimmage and 10 total touchdowns. Once again leading the team in rushing yards, rushing touchdowns, total touchdowns, and yards from scrimmage. Now, once Jimmy Johnson became the head coach of the Dolphins in 1996, taking over for Don Shula, who retired after the 1995 season as the winningest coach in franchise history, Parmalee was relegated to special teams duty, as he lost practically all of his carries to Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Miami's third-round pick that year. But Parmalee was still an important part of the team, even if he wasn't contributing in the traditional way by running the football. And I truly mean that he had no carries over those 3 seasons that Johnson was in charge from 1996 to 98, as despite leading the team in yards from scrimmage in 1995, and despite playing in 47 out of a possible 48 games from 1996 to 98, so you can't say injury was the reason why, Parmalee only ran the ball 51 times. But on special teams, he was great. He was an even better player there than he was at running back, which is saying something, because as you can tell from all these highlights, he wasn't exactly too shabby at running back. Parmalee was the special teams captain in 1998, and he led the team with 31 tackles, averaging just about 2 per game. He always found a way to get to the football, and always knew the best angle to take in order to get to the ball carrier. One reason why Miami made the playoffs in 1998 was because of their strong special teams play, and Parmalee was a big part in that, as Miami finished that season top 5 in the NFL in yards per punt return allowed. Parmalee had established himself across multiple coaching staffs as an important part of the Dolphins in different ways. However, in 1999, the Dolphins decided to do something incredibly bizarre at the NFL draft, where they spent not 1, not 2, but 3 draft picks on running backs. Miami had 4 picks in the top 140, and Jimmy Johnson decided that he was going to use all of them on trying to upgrade the running back position, or just about every single one, taking Mississippi State running back J.J. Johnson in round 2, Syracuse running back Rob Conrad in round 2, and McNeese State running back Cecil Collins in round 5. Now, this didn't work out for Miami at all, as the 3 men combined across their careers to have 1,276 yards and 8 touchdowns, making this one of Miami's worst draft classes ever, and possibly one of the worst draft classes for any team in the entire 1990s. But when you draft 3 running backs, it's very clear that there's going to be a ton of roster competition, and no one is safe. And what made this even crazier for the Dolphins, and crazier for the man you've been watching this whole time in Bernie Parmalee, is that after the draft, the Dolphins had a whopping 12 running backs on their roster. For some perspective, the average team has somewhere between 6 to 8 running backs on the 90-man roster going into training camp. The Dolphins had 9 before the draft, and then they added 3 more. By this point, it was clear that even though Parmalee had been a valuable asset on special teams for a while, and was very productive, and was showing no signs of slowing down from a contribution standpoint in that department, that he might not make the roster. Now, the coaching staff made it seem like Parmalee was going to make the team, and that his roster spot wasn't in any jeopardy after the draft, even despite the insane competition at running back. Said head coach Jimmy Johnson, "Bernie's #1 role is special teams, and he has shown that he has the ability to help our team in a lot of ways." And running backs coach Joel Collier echoed those thoughts, saying, "We know what Bernie can do. He made it onto the team last year, and there was a lot of competition. Special teams always figure into it with him." But after training camp and after the preseason, when it was time for roster cuts, Parmalee was on the outside looking in. He lost the numbers game. It was not an easy cut for the Dolphins to make whatsoever, but it was one that, considering how many running backs they had, they felt they needed to, because Parmalee's special teams play, as good as it wasn't good enough to warrant a roster spot when he was on the wrong side of 30. Said Jimmy Johnson on the cut, "Bernie's such a quality person. He adds a lot to any organization. That was a very difficult release. The bottom line was that we just weren't going to keep 7 backs." And understandably, Parmalee wasn't taking the news well. He wasn't bitter by any means, far from it, but he was disappointed. This was the team that gave him his shot after being a UPS driver. This was the team that believed in him. This was the team he played his entire career with, and just like that, it was over. Said his agent, Cliff Brady, his dream was to be able to turn over his playing card and have it all say Miami. In other words, his dream was to play for one team his entire career. he was signed by the Dolphins, and he wanted to finish his career as a Dolphin. And obviously, that lifelong dream was over. And that's when Parmalee got a call from the man I spoke about at the start of the video, Keith Byars. Because with Parmalee down in the dumps to some extent after getting cut, Byars gave him a call and tried to console him. Byars and Parmalee were really close friends, and Byars, upon hearing the news, was the one who initiated the call. Byars and Parmalee were teammates down in Miami from 1993 to 96, and Byars was having some of his best seasons from a receiving standpoint at the same time that Parmalee was having some of his best seasons from a rushing standpoint. Byars knew the business. He knew the game. The 36-year-old had bounced around a few teams, as he was now on the New York Jets after spending some time before in Miami, Philadelphia, and New England. So Byars, being a good friend, consoled Parmalee and encouraged him to get back on his feet, and that he was going to get another opportunity. He was trying to cheer his friend up and tell him that this didn't have to be the end of his career, and that even though it felt as though his football career was crashing down and it might be the end, that it wasn't going to be. He could still do it. You know the typical talk you give to your friends when they don't get the job, or they don't get the part in the school musical, or a relationship doesn't work out? Byars gave Parmalee that talk, and assured him through a lengthy phone conversation that he was going to get back on his feet and be in the NFL again. Byars was being a very good friend. Obviously, Byars did not have to do that. He did not have to make that phone call, but he wanted to assure his friend and give him advice and help him get another opportunity in the NFL. And the good news for Byars was that he got his wish, because a few days later, his friend, Bernie Parmalee, found a team. Bernie Parmalee was back on a roster, and was going to be contributing on special teams for a new organization, none other than Miami's bitter AFC East rival, the New York Jets. The Jets were absolutely thrilled to get Parmalee, and were thrilled that this man right here was now a part of their organization. Said head coach Bill Parcells, "I feel like I know Bernie Parmalee as well as my own players. Probably better than some of my own players. I've coached against him 15, 16 times. If I don't know that player by then, what am I doing?" He added, linebacker Brian Cox, who was a teammate of Parmalee's down in Miami, has been talking to me about this guy for a year. He said, "Bill, this guy is a player." He said he can help us. He told me that last year. Now, he didn't have to tell me that. So yesterday, I called him up and I told him, quit bugging me, because we got the guy. And other members on the team were thrilled that Parmalee would be improving the special teams unit. Said punter Ray Lucas, "Bernie Parmalee is a monster on special teams. He's relentless. I'm looking forward to seeing him on my side. I tried to block him a couple of times myself. I'm looking forward to seeing him on my side wearing the right color jersey for once." And Chris Hayes, another player on the Jets, said on Parmalee, "When we played him, he was always hustling to the ball." Just like that, Parmalee was back on his feet again thanks to his teammate, Keith Byars. So what's the big deal? Bernie Parmalee and Keith Byars are now teammates. This is awesome. This feels like the best case scenario. Two close friends are working together and are reunited, just like they were in Miami. This feels like a happy ending and a super feel-good story about the power of friendship where everything works out in the end, especially because Parmalee grew up in New Jersey, so he was now playing for his hometown team. Byars is happy, Parmalee's happy, everyone's happy, right? Well, not quite. Because you see, to sign Parmalee, the Jets had to cut someone and make room on the roster. And sure enough, the man that they got rid of to sign Bernie Parmalee, you guessed it, this man right here, Keith Byars. Byars called up Parmalee to assure him that things were going to be all right and that he was going to get a job. And sure enough, Parmalee ends up taking Keith Byars' job, leaving Keith Byars now without a team. His words of encouragement to Parmalee ended up backfiring on him in a big-time way. And to say that Byars was stunned about this development was an understatement. He genuinely could not believe that he was out of a job to his best friend and the man he consoled. As Byars said, "I was surprised and shocked. Did I see it coming? No, not at all." He added, "I talked to Bernie after he got released from Miami. I called him and encouraged him. Bernie's a good friend of mine. We go back a ways. Bernie's an excellent special teams player. I probably would have lobbied for Bernie to come here too, but not to take my job." One writer said that Byars was so stunned at this development that in speaking to the press, he was blindsided and sounded as if he were reading from a Godfather script. But now, it wasn't Parmalee that needed consoling. It was Keith Byars, especially because that phone call from another team never came, as Byars would never play in the NFL again. Keith Byars' playing career, in an absolutely cruel twist of fate and irony, was over. As for what happened to Bernie Parmalee after he joined this team behind me right here, he ended up contributing on special teams, but didn't do a whole lot on the offensive side of the ball, as was to be expected. He only found the end zone twice across his 2 seasons with the Jets, averaging less than 40 touches per season. Parmalee spent the 1999 and 2000 season with the New York Jets before being cut by the team at the start of the 2001 offseason, and that would be the end of his pro football career. He would never play again in the NFL or any other league. Although he did become a positional coach after that, he was actually the running backs coach of the Jacksonville Jaguars for the last 3 seasons, and now he is the running backs coach of the Carolina Panthers if you're watching as of this video getting released. So we'll see how he does over there. When this man right here, Keith Byars, got cut from the Jets, there was no way whatsoever that he saw it coming. Especially like this, especially at the hands of one of his close friends in a quote-unquote backstab. Here was Byars, one of Bill Parcells' guys, and a man who Parcells absolutely loved, who survived the final wave of roster cuts to play for a 14th season, only for that to be taken away from him by one of his closest friends, Bernie Parmalee, who might not have even gotten back on his feet in the first place, if not for the fact that he was consoled by Byars 24 hours before. This feels like a Shakespearean tragedy in many ways, minus the part where no one dies. Because in 1999, at the hands of his close friend, in a cruel piece of irony, the professional football career of Keith Byars went bye-bye. Get your official Jaguar Gear 9 merchandise by going to jj9shop.com, and be sure to like and subscribe, as it really helps the channel out a lot. Join me every Wednesday night where we'll play NFL Trivia for cash prizes at 9 p.m. Eastern over on Twitch. To learn more about the history of college football, subscribe to Jaguar Gator 8. To learn more about the history of Major League Baseball, subscribe to Jaguar Gator 7. Also, special thanks to all of our Patreon supporters for helping out the channel. Your support is greatly appreciated. See how you can become a patron and request future video topics in the description below.